I need to be upfront about something before I even get into what happened in Berea, because if I don't say this first, nothing else lands the way it should. I've covered quarterback situations for a long time. I've seen the hype cycles, the OTA darlings who vanished the moment real football arrived, the spring sensations who couldn't survive a November road game in a hostile stadium. I know how to filter that noise. I thought I was filtering it this time too, and then someone sent me a description of a single nod from a veteran scout on the Cleveland sideline, and I couldn't let it go. That nod is what this is actually about. Not the throws, not the completion numbers, not the quotes that leak through the usual post-practice channels. The nod, one slow, almost reluctant movement from a man who has spent nearly 3 decades inside professional football buildings, specifically learning not to react to things like this. When someone with that resume and that armor moves involuntarily, you stop what you're doing and you pay attention, because that kind of reaction doesn't happen in May. It barely happens in January. And the fact that it happened during an OTA session in Cleveland, watching a rookie quarterback take installation reps against a professional defense, tells you something that no statistic from that morning can adequately capture. Let me tell you what was supposed to happen in Berea this spring, because the contrast matters enormously. The Cleveland quarterback situation entered these OTAs with a narrative that felt settled, comfortable, and frankly, reasonable. Deshaun Watson, the experienced professional, working to reclaim what a brutal stretch of years had stripped from him. Shedeur Sanders, the talented rookie, beginning the long and patient developmental process that every smart organization commits to before asking a first-year quarterback to carry the full weight of a starting role. That story made sense. It aligned with what responsible analysis sounds like when you're being careful not to project too much onto spring football. It held together neatly, and it survived right up until the moment the ball was actually snapped and the people inside that building began seeing something they genuinely were not ready for. Here's what I want you to understand about the environment first, before we even get to what Shedeur did on the field. OTA practice has a specific baseline energy that veteran evaluators learn to tune out almost automatically. There's a constant operational hum, coaches running through installation, players communicating between reps, the general background noise of a professional football team working through early off-season material. Experienced scouts process that ambient sound for exactly what it is: background, low information, the kind of thing you register without actually attending to it. What reportedly happened when Shedeur began taking live reps is that the background noise simply stopped. Conversations happening on the edges of the field ended mid-sentence. People who arrived at that facility expecting to run a routine developmental assessment stopped running it and started watching instead, with the kind of concentrated involuntary attention you only give something that is genuinely demanding it from you, rather than something you're choosing to evaluate. I cannot overstate how significant that atmospheric shift is as an early signal. You cannot manufacture it. You cannot perform it into existence through individual effort or force of personality alone. It happens when a player does something that quietly scrambles the room's existing understanding of what it is looking at. When the category everyone walked in with no longer fits what's actually happening in front of them, and every experienced person in that space recognizes the mismatch simultaneously without coordinating the recognition. That is what Shedeur apparently produced before he ever threw the pass that generated the nod. The room reorganized itself around him before the defining moment even arrived. His footwork from the beginning of those reps was grounded and consistent in a way that experienced evaluators noticed immediately. Not mechanically perfect, not the polished product of years inside a professional system, but disciplined, held together even when installation drills were deliberately creating the kind of controlled chaos specifically designed to find where a young quarterback's foundation starts to crack, and his eyes stayed downfield. Even when pocket simulations were collapsing the available geometry into positions that make it legitimately difficult to maintain your downfield focus, his eyes didn't drift. They stayed locked where they needed to be. Those two qualities together sound straightforward when you describe them plainly, but they represent the single most important dividing line in quarterback evaluation at the professional level. The line between a player whose instincts are wired toward survival and one whose instincts are wired toward execution. Almost every young quarterback, when the pocket deteriorates around him, defaults to improvisation. Their instincts pull them toward movement, toward creating time through escape rather than standing inside a compromised structure and making the throw the play was designed to produce. That's not a character flaw. It's the product of years playing the game at every level before this one, where improvisation was often rewarded and pocket discipline wasn't always structurally required. The NFL punishes that default in systematic, merciless, and beautifully designed ways. Defensive coordinators build specific pressure packages to trigger exactly that survival response and then exploit the throwing lanes that open up as the quarterback drifts. The quarterbacks who can override the survival instinct, who stay inside the structure of a play even when the pocket becomes genuinely uncomfortable people around them. Those are the quarterbacks making decisions in December, when the record actually matters. And witnesses reportedly described Shedeur demonstrating that quality with a natural comfort that coaches simply do not expect from rookies taking their first meaningful reps against professional defensive alignment. Then came the throw. And I'm going to walk through it slowly because the specific details are what give it the weight it carries. Pressure drill, one of the most revealing evaluative tools available in spring practice precisely because it cannot be fully rehearsed in advance. The sensory experience of pressure closing at professional speed, of the pocket shrinking from multiple directions simultaneously, is something a quarterback must encounter in real time. The gap between college pass rush and professional pass rush is not a gradual adjustment, it is a threshold, and crossing it for the first time at full speed is genuinely jarring in ways that reveal a player's true character before they reveal any technical skill whatsoever. Most rookies fail these moments early in their professional exposure, not because their football intelligence is lacking, but because nothing in their prior experience has fully prepared them for what this particular kind of pressure actually feels like when it arrives without a simulation buffer between them and it. Shedeur was facing exactly that closing pressure when he made the decision that stopped people on the sideline cold. Instead of retreating, the completely safe and organizationally defensible choice that no coaching staff would have questioned a first-year quarterback for making, he stepped forward, into the collapsing pocket, moving toward the pressure, eyes locked downfield the entire time. I want you to actually slow down and sit with what that requires from a player in that specific moment. Moving physically toward the threat that every sensory instinct in your body is processing and registering as danger, while simultaneously maintaining the visual discipline and mental clarity to stay present in the downfield structure of a play that the pressure was specifically designed to destroy. Two completely opposing forces pulling against each other in real time, the self-preservation instinct pulling hard in one direction, the execution instinct holding firm against it. Choosing execution in that moment is not a technique that any coaching staff can install in someone who doesn't already carry the cognitive and emotional foundation for it. Either that wiring exists or it doesn't. And it typically takes years inside this league for it to develop, when it develops at all. His mechanics broke down the way they always do when a quarterback is delivering off-platform under genuine closing pressure. His base went unstable. His body was angled in ways that compromised the mechanical foundation his coaches spend significant practice time constructing. The geometry underneath him was wrong in the specific ways that normally produce off-target throws, tipped balls, or interception opportunities that defensive coordinators file away for their own professional satisfaction. And the ball arrived exactly where it needed to be, on time, in stride, into a window that had no reasonable right to be successfully attacked from that body position in that moment. The receiver didn't have to adjust a single step. He caught it clean and turned upfield without breaking his rhythm at all. The sideline went quiet, not silent exactly, something more specific than that. The running professional commentary that football people maintain as a constant functional habit, processing what they observe, filing it into existing categories, managing evaluations in real time. That commentary stopped. When it stops involuntarily, when something interrupts it that doesn't fit the existing categories cleanly enough to be filed away, it means something genuinely outside the normal range just happened in that space. That's the moment the scout nodded. One slow, almost reluctant acknowledgement from the most professionally guarded evaluator on that sideline that the framework he had been using to assess Shedeur Sanders that morning was no longer adequate for what he was actually watching. Now I want to give serious time to the second moment because analytically it carries even more weight than the first throw, and it almost never gets the attention it deserves in these accounts. Full team period. The defense aligned in a coverage rotation built specifically to eliminate the primary receiving option before the play could fully develop. Linebacker positioned in the throwing lane, corner pressing hard on the boundary side. The coverage rotating to compress every available option toward the short, safe, completely manageable check down. For any rookie on a new coaching staff still working to establish organizational trust, the correct response to that defensive look is conservative. Accept the gain, protect the football, take what the defense is offering and nothing more, because nobody questions that decision, and it reflects exactly the kind of manageable judgment coaches spend real time trying to install in young quarterbacks during this phase. Shedeur reportedly identified something inside that coverage rotation that the rotation was specifically constructed to conceal. He introduced a deliberate half-second pause in his delivery. Not hesitation from confusion or indecision. Not a rookie flinching under complexity. Intentional manipulation. using his body language and delivery timing as false information, feeding a specific read to a linebacker whose entire professional training is oriented around identifying quarterback intention before the ball ever leaves the hand, half a second. The precise window required for a trained defender to commit his weight and his eyes in a direction based on what he believes he is observing. In that manufactured half second, a receiver drifted into a narrow gap in the rotating boundary coverage, a window that existed only because the linebacker had already been moved by the false information Shedeur's deliberate hesitation had delivered to him. That's not an accident. That's not instinct operating blindly. That's a young quarterback using deception as a tactical instrument against a professional defense in his first meaningful spring reps. That's the kind of thing veteran quarterbacks develop over multiple seasons, if they're fortunate enough to develop it at all. The margin for the throw was small. Flat trajectory, tight spiral, crossbody release mechanics. Timing precise enough that being even fractionally late produces either an incompletion or something considerably worse than an incompletion. He threw it. The ball arrived perfectly. The receiver never broke stride. The sideline responded with genuine, unrehearsed emotion. And I want to be specific about why that particular quality matters as an evaluative signal, because football players watch quarterbacks operate every single day and develop extraordinarily precise internal calibration for the difference between a completion that stayed comfortably inside normal margins and one that required something genuinely beyond normal margins to produce. That calibration is deeply accurate and cannot be convincingly faked. When it generates spontaneous organic reaction rather than polite professional acknowledgement, coaching staffs treat that signal as among the most reliable information available to them. But the detail I keep returning to, the one that matters most out of everything I've described, is that the defensive players on the field reacted too. Defenders reacted. And I need you to understand what that actually means inside a professional football building, because it's the most significant data point in this entire account. Defenders are the hardest possible audience in any NFL facility. They are professionally and personally invested in not being impressed by the quarterback across from them. Their entire daily competitive purpose is opposition. They develop through constant repetition an extremely refined sense for the difference between a fortunate completion and a real one. When defensive players respond to a quarterback's performance with something resembling genuine involuntary respect, when the people whose professional purpose is specifically to stop that quarterback react differently than their job description allows them to, no organizational preference and no official depth chart positioning can reverse the direction that internal evaluation is already moving. I have to be honest about what one OTA session can and cannot establish, because this story deserves that honesty without any reservation at all. Spring football has generated more misleading conclusions than any other evaluation environment this league produces. The distance between looking composed during a controlled installation period and operating effectively when a defensive coordinator has spent a full week cataloging your tendencies and designing pressure specifically to exploit the habits you've already revealed on film, that distance is enormous. It has humbled quarterbacks with more obvious physical gifts than Shedeur Sanders possesses. The questions he hasn't answered yet are legitimate, and they demand real answers from real situations. What does his demeanor look like after his first genuinely ugly interception in a stadium reacting to his every decision? How does he process the adjustment when a coordinator builds an entire week of game planning around the tendencies these OTAs just put on tape? What does his body language communicate to teammates after he absorbs a full-speed hit from a starting pass rusher with an actual record attached to the outcome? Those questions aren't designed to diminish what happened in Berea. They are the legitimate pressure test every young quarterback must eventually survive before any readiness conversation reaches a settled conclusion. And Watson's presence in this competition carries real weight that honest analysis cannot casually dismiss. He has managed possessions where entire seasons compressed into single decisions under maximum pressure. He understands things about reading professional defenses in genuinely hostile environments that no spring practice can meaningfully simulate. Veterans carry accumulated knowledge that reveals itself in ways essentially invisible to outside observers, recognizing disguised blitz structures before they fully develop, manipulating coverage with pre-snap movement that only produces the right read for someone who has seen 50 variations of that same disguise in real game conditions. These things are real, and they matter in ways that don't always show up in spring practice highlight packages. But when I try to locate the full significance of what happened that morning, I keep arriving at the same place. The change was not in one throw. It was not in two throws. It was in the building itself. Evaluators who arrived expecting to manage a standard developmental process reportedly left discussing a completely different timeline. Teammates who entered that morning viewing Shedeur as a promising young player they were rooting for reportedly began responding to him with the specific quality of attention that players only direct toward a quarterback they are genuinely starting to believe in. And the distance between a rookie who shows managed, encouraging potential and a rookie who generates authentic belief inside an NFL locker room is not a distance that any organizational structure can manufacture or artificially close. Belief in a professional football locker room operates on its own internal timeline, and once it starts moving in a particular direction, it eventually becomes impossible to contain within whatever official hierarchy the depth chart is trying to maintain. What I keep returning to is this. The scout's nod is the most honest signal available from that entire morning. More honest than any completion percentage. More honest than sideline celebration that might carry even a trace element of performance. More honest than any press conference language filtered through organizational awareness before it reaches the public. It was the involuntary reaction from the most skeptical, most experienced, most professionally self-protected evaluator in that facility. His head moved because what he witnessed required a fundamentally different response than anything he prepared for when he walked onto that field. That is not hype looking for a convenient host. That is recognition. The reluctant, professionally costly, specific kind of recognition that something is arriving in Cleveland earlier than anyone inside that building planned for or is fully prepared to manage. Cleveland entered this offseason with a version of events it was comfortable maintaining. The veteran leads. The rookie learns. The organizational hierarchy holds on a timeline that matches the commitments already made. That version survived until one morning of football made it considerably harder to sustain. Not because Watson has been formally displaced or any official declaration has been issued, but because the emotional arithmetic inside that building moved in a direction that every subsequent rep must now account for. Every sharp decision Shedeur makes going forward carries the accumulated weight of what those witnesses saw. Every moment of composure under pressure adds to a case that was supposed to build slowly across years, but appears to be building at a pace nobody was fully prepared to handle. Training camp is where the real evaluation intensifies. The preseason is where it becomes visible to everyone who wasn't standing in Berea. But underneath all of it, that one slow nod from the most skeptical man in the building remains the most precise signal available from this entire situation. The people with the most experience and the most to lose professionally from reacting prematurely have already started asking the question the rest of the football world is only now beginning to seriously consider. How much earlier than expected is this actually happening? And when the answer becomes impossible to deny, will Cleveland trust what its own eyes have been showing it, or wait for permission from a world that wasn't standing on that sideline when the scouts had moved?